Ready? Okay. Welcome everyone to the November 9th, 2022 BAR Large in-person meeting at the Crawcheck Memorial Room at 2 George Street. My name is John Robinson. I'll be serving as the chairman this afternoon and evening. The other board members present this afternoon are Jay White, who's actually stepped out, but he's recused on agenda items number 2 and 3. Miss Luda Sobchuk, James Metters, Seton Brown, and Carol Wheeler sitting for us as alternate on those agenda items number 2 and 3. City staff present are Tori Parrish, the city architect, and Lawrence Courtney, staff architect. The order of each individual presentation will be as follows. There is first an introduction or overview of the project with city staff for the board and public. This is followed by the application presentation. This application presentation has a 10-minute time limit unless extended by the chair. This application presentation period may include any and all questions asked by the applicant by the board or staff. During the application presentation, any and all presenters should clearly state their name for the record. A person affiliated with the project, be they the owner, developer, architect, designer, or other consultant, should speak during this portion of the meeting rather than in the following public comment period. We have written public comment which has been submitted to this board and staff in advance. The deadline for written public comment is noon on the Tuesday before the meeting. The board has had opportunity to see those comments and to absorb them and consider them. Those comments will only be read into the record if deemed necessary or advisable by the chair. Written public comment, public comment then follows this for each person from the public present this evening. They may approach the microphone and speak. There's a 2-minute time limit. Each person wishing to speak on an agenda item should state their name and address for the record. The application presentation and the public comment period is followed by city staff comments and recommendations. This is in turn followed by the applicant's response or clarification to either the public comment or city staff recommendations. Normally a 5-minute time limit applies to this. Additional time can be taken deemed necessary by the chair. After this, the applicant should only speak if called upon. This is in turn followed by board discussion and a vote. The application presentation and public comment period are now closed. The applicant may clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising their hand and waiting to be called upon. As a procedural note, agenda item number 2, 295 Calhoun Street, was tabled at our October the 12th meeting, but is being reconsidered this afternoon in the ordinary course of business, beginning with board discussion, which is where we left off at our last meeting. This is a friendly reminder to members of the public to please silence all cell phones or other potentially disruptive electronic or other devices. This is also a friendly reminder, particularly those who may have not presented here before or wishing to be heard as a member of the public here before, that the BAR's purview is limited. Therefore, comments should be limited to architecture only. Comments related to zoning or considerations such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, or livability concerns are not the purview of this board and therefore, within reason, should not be addressed here. Further protocol for the meeting and for the benefit of the public. Public obviously can be here in person at 2 George Street. We also have a YouTube streaming feature. You can find that channel at the City of Charleston BARL and also look for our archive of previous meetings there. Again, public written comment was required to be submitted by 12 yesterday. Those comments are furnished to the board and incorporated into our decision-making process. This is a reminder to any member of the public who in the future would like to submit written comment that they can use the citizen participation form at innovate.charleston-sc.gov, that they can call and leave a message at 843-724-3781, or mail those comments to the Department of Planning, Preservation, and Sustainability by snail mail at 2 George Street, Charleston, 29401. This is a reminder to our applicants that, what's that?
I was just going to say, so you might Sorry.
That's okay. This is a reminder to applicants that all materials that they wish to present were submitted in advance of the meeting tonight. The applicant should just direct Mr. Courtney to the slide to which they wish to advance, going backwards and forwards. Public comment is recorded and is part of a public meeting format. You're consenting to the recording and publication of anything that you say here in tonight's meeting. Members of the public need to state their name for the record. Lastly, protocol for fellow board members, which I think they all know by now, which is that if I butcher your motion, please have me restate it. Then we will poll each person on each agenda item with the exception of approving our previous meeting minutes. And you should respond to the motion when I poll you for it with a yay in favor or a nay not in favor. So as a reminder to the public and everyone listening at home tonight that the results will be posted at charleston-sc.gov/VAR. That, I believe, our first agenda item is approval of the minutes from the October 26th meeting.
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Agenda item number 2, 295 Calhoun Street.
Right. 295 Calvin Street is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a mixed-use development, requesting one additional story based on architectural merit and context. And we've got some context slides showing you the location. This is the location with the red outline on Calhoun, just north of Alberta Long Lake. This is the property as it looks today from Calhoun Street and from the corner of Calhoun and Halsey. Some images from the west looking where you can see the north side of Calhoun. Rubber Hospital, north side of Calhoun. Properties to the right. And then an aerial showing the, that one actually includes the old building that's been demolished. Great, and we will have the applicant present now.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, let me first respectfully request that we have an additional 10 minutes.
Very well. I would just remind the applicant that in the regular ordinary course of business, we tabled this item when we were in discussion.
Yes,
but because it's been 2 weeks, I'm going to give the applicant the benefit of re-presenting.
Thank you very much. And by simply making you aware that Alice Paler, who's going to be doing the presentation this evening, husband passed away and they're receiving family and friends. So we said, if you'll keep Alice and her family in prayer, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a nice presentation. I want to spend about 5 minutes talking in a broad sense about where we've come from over the last 2 years or more, working with various groups. And then we'll turn it over to Jan McCullough, who is an architect, and he'll be going through, I think, you made some comments at the last meeting, before it was laid on the table, that we hope to be able to address for this evening. So let me begin by saying that whenever we develop a project, significantly one this significant, we spend a great deal of time trying to reach out to those neighbors that are going to be affected most by our development. And we have been doing this for over a year and a half, almost 2 years, meeting with different neighbors, different groups, adjacent property owners, etc. We began initially when we bought the property, working over a year with the Medical University. Then we made the commitment upon acquisition, we would apply for our own multifamily zoning. That there was a strong distaste for a parking garage, or things we talked about before, a hotel, office, etc. With that, working with the Medical University, we worked relative to the expressed concerns they had about the critical need for quality housing for their students, staff, and their campus. So we're respectful of that. We then met with, given that charge and agreement, we met with the city planning department, planning and zoning, and we received unanimous approval for our zoning. We also received unanimous approval from city council. Now, probably the most important meetings we've held has been going on for almost 2 years. Because we have reached out to all of the joint property owners. We have held many meetings with the neighborhoods that are not maybe adjacent to, but are close to our property. They really, we spent a lot of time with Roper, and they give us some nice letters of strong support. We know the lead interest. But a couple of the things that have taken place that are really important, we hope that you can and will respect, is the property that is closest to us, has the most visual contact to our development, is the Halsey Park Association. We've met many times with members and with their board to address the issues and concern that they have for our project. They came away and they came back to us with 8 very serious requests for modifying the architecture and design of our property. We worked very hard with them, and I'm happy to say we were able to meet all 8 of their requests. Therefore, they now support our project and express their support, and we continue to do that. The second would be Halsey Park. We met over 2 years ago with both the citizens and the board on various occasions. We listened to their requests, and probably the most significant change we made to the architecture style and design of our development is to step down the height of the project from Calhoun Street back to the residential area. That it was well received. The president of the board spoke positively last week at Halsey Park. The last thing, we worked a year and a half to 2 years with the architectural staff of the city of Charleston. We have found them to be helpful. They've given us good direction. They've given us good feedback. And at this juncture, we feel that we have responded to and made every change, which consists of, in total, approximately 40 significant changes to our design. But because of their help, because of the feedback we received from the neighbors, we have a better project. We have a more attractive project, and one that we really could not be more happy with. The concern about the 8th story, each of you know what the 8th story, the benefits that it provides: a small footprint, strong, good setbacks, and it allows us to do some architectural features and design, which Jan will talk about, that we simply don't have in a wood frame construction of a 7-story building that we originally planned to develop. I think it's really important that maybe we fully appreciate by going to concrete and steel. Yes, the cost is a great deal more. The architects certainly can appreciate that. But we build properties, and we have for 50 years. We build them to own, to keep, something that will be that we will be proud of. Despite the extra expense of the concrete and steel building, we think it's worth the investment. The 8th story really only adds 7 feet to the height of the 8th story versus the height of the 7th story. Taking that one step further with feedback and guidance from the architectural staff of the city, we shrank the footprint of the 8th floor so that if you're walking either side of Halsey or Calhoun Street or whatever, if you're driving, you cannot see the 8th story. Now, across the lake, you certainly can. But we think it has maybe a less of a height presence, given the setbacks and what have you that we've been able to do. In the design evolution, we have given up between 20 and 30,000 square feet from the first design that we shared with you. Given what we're all experiencing now with cost of construction and interest rates and everything, it's very challenging. But we still are, we are committed to move forward on this development, to do a project, complete project that you will be proud of and that we will be proud of. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jan to speak something more intelligent than me, but thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jan Makovnik, and I'm with Davis Carter's Kodai, an architect and designer on the project. We can please go to number 5. We did already do the presentation, we talk about lots of changes we've done, and we've done a few more changes after that. So I'm gonna just do quickly a few of those that remind what we talked about the last time. With this slide here, when we mentioned that we look at the site, we look at the program, and we actually gave it to a couple architects, designers in our office and said, without them actually knowing exactly the design, what would you do with the site if you have certain criteria, certain program? Obviously, the ground floor, we wanted to have retail, we want to activate it, we didn't want to have an invisible garage, we want a certain amount of units, we need to obviously park the project. There is the south, these are the best view, there is the waterfront, there is a boardwalk, there is the water, we need to take advantage of it. And quite frankly, most of the concepts they came out with, the sketches, came with a similar concept, very similar. So we kind of felt that I think we are in the right place, and we feel conceptually this is still the right approach. Here we go. But we did listen, and as Big mentioned that we as architects, I mean, you many times you hear all these comments, and there's 40 people making so many suggestions trying to improve the project. But I think what we need to do also is look at more, not a specific suggestion and recommendations, but need to look at actually the goals of those. And the main goal was really, can we make this building feel a little bit smaller, change the scale of the building, what we can do visually with the building, how we can deal with the, as Vic mentioned, with the 8th floor, can we set it back a little bit? So what we did since the previous meetings in August last year and the last meeting 4 weeks ago, then what we did was we set it back the top floor of the building by about 8 feet all around. We cut back about 20 to 30,000 square feet on the south side facing the lake, because we did feel that actually this is a more successful way to dealing with the volume and dealing with the scale of the building, especially stepping it towards the townhomes and towards the lake. That we felt that it does two things. It actually lessens the mass of the building, but also shortens visually that long elevation. Well, since then, what we also did, what you can notice on this elevation, was we introduced a cast stone base that wraps around the whole building. We still felt the balconies that we introduced are really nice, and you see it on the perspectives that they really have their function and really visually breaks up the length of the base of the building. But we did feel that probably introducing a continuous base is the right approach architecturally. So we did that. And what we also did in here was we also started to modify the corner of Halsey and Calhoun. We can go to the next slide. There was also from the staff, we had a comment whether we can do something with the facade on the Calhoun Street, whether we can make the east and west side symmetrical. So we actually reconfigured a little bit the interior of the building and the exterior to just meet that. So now you see that the left side and the right side with the centerpiece, they are more symmetrical. So the whole concept, the building on the Calhoun Street, it's a symmetrical building with kind of the three bays with the two recesses in the middle. And that was also going to be better seen on the perspective, how it breaks up the scale of the building. Next, please. On this slide here, you can start to feel that, that we still have the balconies, but we did introduce the base, and I think it's actually pretty successful. And it might be actually nice that a little heavier base around these balconies will create a little bit more privacy also for people that use those balconies at the street level, although they'll be elevated probably about 6 to 7 feet, so they're not going to be at the sidewalk level. There was another additional comment, which I think was a good comment, was that the portal, the entry portal, was originally kind of more like a mounted almost at the corner and had a glass at the second floor, and there was kind of a maybe big awkward transition between the brick and the stone. So we eliminated that and make it a bit heavier base there, and continues basically wrapping it around and making the cast stone, the stone base dying to the brick. And also from the staff, there was one more comment, was whether we can do a little bit more prominent top at the corner of the building. So what we did, we actually created a little deeper cornice and projecting it out a little bit more towards the corner, so it has a little bit more prominence. Next, please. This is just a detail of the base, how we dealt with it, and we actually eliminated the glass on the second floor and wrapped it around with a cast stone. Next, please. This one just shows the composition now of the building, like how we deal with the scale on the Calhoun Street, how we recess much deeper recesses. And actually, the building now is like 3 segments, really, three separate volumes they're broken by the recessed area, but also this already reflects the new adjustments when the left side and the right side, the east and the west, are now more they are symmetrical, basically the way we go. Next, please. We can actually skip this slide now. There was another comment architecturally. Again, there are like two changes what you see in this slide in here. And there was, again, you can see down the balconies that on these, also on the west side, the base would continue, the stone base, and there would be balconies on the second and the third floor. And also there was this little bit awkward detail when the glass corner going down was kind of hanging a little bit, and it was intersecting the base, and it wasn't a clean detail, and I agree with that. So I think just continuing and bringing that down, that volume, and doing a more heavier corner at the ground level as well, I think really helped architecturally. So that was a change we've done. Next, please. On this one, it's obviously now we can again see really nicely the stepping of the building. When it's that steps down, really starts with like a really 5 floors, go with that kind of a bay window cam effect, more glass, and then go to 6. And then what we also did, what we were asked by the staff, was we cut the 7th floor further back, and so create a more significant step on, especially the one that is closer to the main facade. So that originally what you see on the 7th floor was pushed back about 30 feet, so we pushed it back. There was probably 1 unit that we eliminated on each side. Next, please. And this is just, again, illustrating the same change what we've done, which we cut back that 7th floor about 30 feet back. So then there's more like, there's a larger area of the six-story portion of the building, and goes up into 7 and then the 8th floor. And then the front starts at the 5 floors expression. Next, please. And this is just detailed walking down the sidewalk on Halsey and showing that the ground base with the balconies on the ground floor, which actually are now covered by this cast stone base, and then a continue or like a frame about that, about like 20 feet, which is how it's doing. Next, please. This actually, it's pretty much the end of our presentation. There was also a question, and we were looking at some floor plans and perspectives, and we're going to make sure that they are well coordinated, because those feeling there was a little discrepancy. So we're not going to show it right now, but at the back of this presentation, we have a full, about 12-page edition, which is a full-scale drawings of every floor plan and the elevations. We also added 8 dimensions on the elevations. Elevations are generated from the same software that we use on the rendering. So that way, if there's any question, we can look at those more in detail and check every step, everything, every important, every crucial dimension of the building will be shown on those if there is any concern of any discrepancies between 3D images and the 2D images and the floor plans of the building.
Thank you. All right. Written comment has been absorbed, and I won't read it into the record tonight. Is there any member of the public with us this evening that we should be heard on this agenda item?
Good evening. My name is Brian Turner. I'm the president and CEO of the Preservation Society of Charleston.
And I'm Winslow Hasty. I'm also the president and CEO of the Historic Charleston Foundation. Thank you for entertaining this somewhat different approach.
So we're speaking in tandem tonight because of the sheer importance of this for the board's review. And just as a reminder, after the board's 2 previous denials of this project, which is highly consequential for its visibility in the community, and after it was challenged in court, our organization sought to intervene to take part and participate in the mediation. We were opposed by the developer. They characterized our groups as having, quote, no real interest in the outcome other than trying to stop/delay the development. And I want to express to you that that couldn't be further from the truth. And we hope, as you all know from our constant advocacy over the years, we're advocates for quality design and construction, but we're also pragmatic and we're solutions oriented. When it comes to the design of buildings that will define this generation of the city's architecture, we pressed on our city to demand the best. We acknowledge the underlying zoning anticipates a large structure, but it is fully within your power to demand a design that is excellent and responsive to the site's context.
Thanks, Brian. Just going to add a little more color to that. Just wanting to remind you all to kind of step back and look at this from a little bit of a higher level, because this is, I know you guys have been working on this project for a long time. And just to remind you all that it's, there's ample legal authority for you to defend a denial of this, what seems to be problematic project. It's squarely within the BAR's authority to consider this building's appropriateness relative to the overall context of the surrounding historic district, as well as to adjacent historic properties. That is obvious, I know, but I think it's important to remind ourselves. And then also, I want to, the record will show that there is a competent, substantial, material evidence supporting your denial. This board should merely repeat its justification for the 2 previous denials, since only minimal efforts have been made to redesign to address your explicit comments on a proper path forward. I think it's also important to remember that it's not the BAR's job to figure out how to get an applicant an additional floor for dubious architectural merit. With all due respect, in our minds, you all should be determining how to shape a 7-story building, which is allowed by zoning, into something more compatible with its historic surroundings. And as we all know now, you do have the legal authority to make a building smaller by a half story. An 8-story building should not be considered at all in the first place, as the basic standards for merit have clearly not been met. This is a classic case of the need for a transitional massing between the medical district and the finer grain of residential Charleston Village. I think it's important to remember that Roper Hospital, which is across the street, which actually is located in the medical district, this is not, is only 6 stories and has a very deep setback from Calhoun Street. That said, while outright denial should be simple and straightforward in this case, we would also urge the board to provide clear direction with strong reference to the BAR principles in order to give this developer a roadmap for approval. Thank you very much.
Administration. Further, other members of the public wishing to be heard.
And again, with the Preservation Society of Charleston, following my colleagues to reinforce a few points and introduce some more comments for your consideration. The clear disagreement among board members at the last meeting is a strong indication that this design continues to be problematic. In Charleston, the minimum threshold for new construction should be excellence. And particularly for this site, which is highly visible from all angles and is one of the first properties you experience entering the city. It deserves the highest quality architecture. A 7-story large-scale building could be done on this site, and it could be done well. But as presented, the building has a blocky massing and generic design that make no attempt to respond to the site, context, or Charleston's unique character, and therein lies our reason for opposition. In April and August of last year, the board was clear that this proposal needed a completely fresh approach. 40 tweaks do not add up to a redesign. We urge you to seriously consider how entertaining this proposal would undermine the BAR process. As mentioned, the BAR principles guide new construction and set specific standards to determine what is compatible with Charleston's architectural character. Here are a few constructive comments informed by those principles to demonstrate why this design is inappropriate. First, Charleston is characterized by narrow frontages and vertical proportions. While this site allows for a building of this size, there is no attempt to break down the building in a way that reads vertically. Instead, the building extrudes the footprint of the site and has a very blocky massing. There should be significant deep breaks to create vertical masses that are reinforced with corresponding breaks in the roof line. A building should relate to the human scale. The sheer 8-story height of the facades, the heaviness of the base, and lack of fine-grained detail at the ground floor create a poor pedestrian experience. Setting back the upper floors would create a more relatable scale for the building, and more glazing and texture should be introduced at the base levels. Similarly, the top of the building is very weak, and there should be a distinctive treatment for the upper level to create a strong hierarchy from base to middle to top. Finally, our local vernacular reflects simple, repetitive elements that create harmony in building facades. The amount of fenestration types, architectural features, and movements made in the building are far too many and create a very busy design. There needs to be significant simplification and greater rationality brought to the building construction. So due to the degree of architectural issues, we feel strongly this proposal is nowhere near the threshold deserving of an 8th floor. Additional height is something earned. And just because there are some larger buildings nearby does not warrant an extra floor for this proposal. In fact, the site is squarely within the Charleston Village neighborhood boundaries and open on all sides to where it is fully visible and highly impactful. Therefore, we feel it fails on the point of context as well. We urge the board to hold the line with your previous rulings on this project and send a strong message that this design should again be denied for full restudy of height, scale, mass, and architectural direction.
And again, further members of the public wish to be heard on this item.
Thank you. Justin Schwebel with the Historic Charleston Foundation. I'd just like to reiterate my colleagues in the preservation community's concerns again over this project. This is the 4th time I stood before you to provide comment on this project, and once again seeing little substantial changes to the project as proposed. I think the board really needs to uphold the previous decisions of 2 motions of denial to really kind of reinforce the legitimacy of this board's standing moving forward. If there's anything besides a denial this evening, I think it jeopardizes the idea of making substantial changes following a denial of a project for anything moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwebel. Additional members of the public wishing to be heard.
My name is Steve Botcher. I live at 74 Halsey Boulevard, right down the street from where the project will be. I strongly support the 8-story building. As I was gathering my thoughts on what I wanted to say this afternoon, one of my neighbors is in Paris. I was visiting a museum, and at the museum, they had an exhibit around the controversy around the Eiffel Tower. I'd just like to read one part of it. This is from February 14th, 1887. We writers, painters, sculptors, architects, and passionate devotees of the hitherto untouched beauty of Paris protest with all our strength and all our indignation in the name of slighted French taste against the erection of this useless and monstrous Eiffel Tower. I literally got this while I was thinking about it. I just reflected on what I've heard and what I've read around 295. I said, I support it. I support it for 3 reasons. One is I walk my dog around Long Lake, which I do every day. I look at other buildings. Obviously, the Ashley House, the Rutledge Tower, the Jasper House. This building has more architectural appeal than any of those that I see as I walk my dog around the lake. 2, as Vic mentioned, he's been responsive to us. The setbacks on Halsey Boulevard, some of the side changes, will make it feel more like a neighborhood feed into our neighborhood. So the third piece is there'll be less traffic. I know you just said earlier on the traffic's not part of the food, but there's less units. So I hope that you do approve the 8-story building. I think it would certainly be to the benefit of the Halsey neighborhood that I live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Botcher. Further members of the public wishing to be heard.
Good evening. My name is James Ward. I live at 45 Sycamore Avenue in Charleston, west of the Ashley, previously downtown, and taught at the College of Charleston. First of all, I appreciate all of the work that's been done on this and all the comments that have come through. I don't really want to be rude, but this building is not the Eiffel Tower. It is certainly a radically different idea that's being presented there. My main concern as a landscape architect is that this building should perform some kind of entry function for the road as we come into the city. And as we look at the street sections through there and the perspectives, it presents a rather asymmetrical view there, where the setback is not nearly what it is on the other side of the road. And of course, the height of the building enters into that as well. So I feel like somehow in this process, the neighbors have their concerns, and I think that what's been done for the park is really fantastic and will improve the neighborhood and needs to be supported. But we still haven't gotten down to the level of what building we want to build as an important entrance to the city. And this goes beyond the immediate area, perhaps to some extent, but I think it's an important consideration here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further members of the public wishing to be
Hi, my name is David Cooper. I live at 66 Gadsden Street, approximately 300 or 400 yards from the project. I had the opportunity to attend and observe the last meeting and hear some of the comments from the board members as to what the remaining issues are with respect to the 295 Calhoun design. I have to say that I left that meeting a little confused and unclear as to why this project is not moving forward with approval. Perhaps I don't fully understand the issues. However, some of the issues that were brought up by the board don't appear to rise to the level of not approving this project. And quite frankly, they come across as things that the average Charlestonian or the general public would never even notice. I heard the term architectural merit used quite a bit, but it was never defined, and it's not clear what its applicability is to some of the issues that were raised. For instance, deferring this approval for something like a shadow on Halsey, what does that even mean? Perhaps it has some architectural merit, whatever that is, but it comes across as confusing and not having any practical relevance and also somewhat subjective. Also, deferring this project based on comments to the effect, and I paraphrase here, that this should represent new Charleston, that be something old Charleston could be proud of, or whatever the verbiage was, the exact verbiage was. These are really inappropriate comments that are subjective, opinion-based viewpoints that have no basis in architecture and have no place in the approval process. You have a difficult job, but that doesn't mean you should succumb to the Preservation Society or any other constituents that want to freeze Charleston in time. Your goal should be to form a consensus on the design that we can all live with an understanding that not everyone is going to get what they want. And that's okay. But the review process can turn into a paralysis that ultimately sends us to court, then we all lose. The facts are that this development, in spite of the comments to the contrary, will provide a significant visual enhancement to this intersection, and let's not kid ourselves and call this a historic corridor, because it's not. Otherwise, a lot more attention would have been paid to this area in the past. This project will deliver some badly needed public improvements to the area and serve as a nice amenity to the surrounding neighborhood. I don't mean to diminish any of your comments or efforts. However, after 2 years, the approval process needs to move forward. The remaining outstanding issues simply don't outweigh the significant benefits and improvements this project will bring to our community.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. City staff comments or recommendations?
Sure. I'd like to take a moment just to provide a little guidance about what architectural merit is. It is defined in our ordinance, and it is, in this case, it's obviously the rewarding of an extra floor, but just for anybody who's in the room that is not aware of how it's defined in the ordinance, it is defined in architectural merit and context, which means that a project contributes to the public realm, utilizes the highest level of materials and exemplary design, and it also reflects its context. And so staff observation is the applicant has responded to staff comments. Just as a reminder, those were to reduce the length of the units at the south and the seventh floor, and to make some fenestration adjustments across Calhoun to make the fenestration pattern symmetrical to reflect the symmetrical massing on that side, and to make some tweaks to the corner, chamfered corner, to either make it more dominant or less dominant. And then our staff comment is, as evident on page 16, where the acid etched cast stone base wraps the projecting balconies at the first floor, revise the exterior wall of the units behind the balconies to also be clad in the same acid etched cast stone. Treating this wall with brick visually diminishes the substantial nature of the base, and then our recommendation is conceptual approval with board and staff comments.
Thank you, Ms. Parrish. Any response from the applicant?
As a matter of information, we have met on several occasions with the preservation group, the historic, taken recommendations and ideas from them, and we've incorporated them within the project. There hasn't been that many, but we've really reached out to try to meet what they would like to see on the project. We're in a position now where We have our neighbors, all of the adjoining property owners support our project, all of them. And now we have representatives from the community that are in strong support of our development. And we feel like that we've now spent 2 years going through, we've gone through a lot more than 40 changes. Those are simply the significant changes. We feel like we're where we should be, where we need to be. It's a project we're excited about, and we think it will be a strong attribute to the city going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. For discussion and a vote on this agenda item.
I'd like to ask the applicant a question.
Certainly.
So Lawrence, as part of the presentation, and if I could ask you to take a look at the precedent images that were used. And look at the precedent images. And I've read them, but just in your words, could you talk about those precedent images and what you brought forward from there into your structure, or why did you use those precedent images?
Yeah. In this one, we just wanted to more introduce. I mean, this one, for instance, was more about the glazing and the facades that are facing the south. That we are introducing more glazing on our building. There was a children's hospital, so that was just an example. So there were little things, you know. It was the glazing. We can go to another slide.
Well, I mean, but I'd like to know about that. I mean, I'd like to do each one because I'm trying to understand. So if that's used as a precedent image, you know, why?
But it was also, it's not necessarily precedent, it's almost like context image. So we wanted to see like our buildings maybe in a bit more detail, what's around it.
What was your name? I'm sorry.
Jason?
Okay. Just for the record.
Sorry. Jason Long on the south. So yeah, I mean, some of them are more contextual. Just when you see our building, some of the certain treatments we done, and some angles, and just looking at the buildings that are nearby. So we did feel that, I mean, there was lots of movement. That, for instance, where we did here, I think we were looking at the just scales of the building right now. So this was more like just for the scale. I mean, this building definitely, I think, in terms of scale, it addresses a lot more what's happening on the street level and what's happening on the house boulevard. But we can go to like some of the more historic. I mean, obviously, we didn't want to fall literally. We just wanted to look at some elements of these buildings that we felt that maybe they can inspire us. For instance, there was the corner when we compared it. Maybe it was that we had to deal a little bit with the chamfered corner. Obviously, this image was introducing Quebec. So when we were talking about some of the elements of the architecture, what we see on the single family homes, on the 3-story homes, when you also have these narrow side yards, that we actually we felt that in a similar way we are addressing the western side of the project when we have actually introducing the park, the linear park. We can call it alley, but it actually can be a very nice space, and when the building next to it is developed, maybe it can expand a little bit more. But also, I think it was the scale and introducing that some of the elements that you see on some architecture in Charleston, which are the 2-3-story expressions that we introduce on the base of the building that helps to activate the park side, or also I think it's going to help also on the housing side of the project. So those were like these examples that we were trying to use and that we were inspired. But some of them are more like contextual images. We didn't want to be inspired by them, but we did want to see in the context when you're walking down the street, what you're walking by, when you are, let's say, the children's hospital, when you are in the Rocker Hospital, or when you are in our building.
Further board discussion.
I can start. I'm not repeating all of the comments I made the last time, but thanks for having mentioned floor plans and elevations. That helps really. And it's per the submittal requirements. What I said the last time was that I think that this submittal needs to be compared to the original denied submittal in all fairness to you. And I thought that the 8 stories are acceptable on Calhoun Street because it's a larger scale. And I thought it was the concept that you presented of stepping down towards the lake is the right direction. The last time I looked through the meeting minutes, and I think it was mentioned 5 times that the 8th story needs to be pushed back. There was not a staff comment that was discussed within the board. And I don't see any significant step back from the previous version of the 8 stories. So the limited views that you showed are from Halsey Boulevard. They're close to the building, but this building is highly visible. The Preservation Society mentioned that further. As long as you walk a little further down Halsey Boulevard or around the lake, you'll see the boxy nature of the building. And I think the last time we even looked at the elevation and talked about how much it should probably be pushed back to make the stepping down meaningful. And I don't see that here. I see some of the other improvements. I think the stone base is an improvement. It's all an improvement towards simplification. The portal is an improvement. So I think that's positive. But I think height, scale, and mass right now is the main point of the conceptual review. And I don't see the massing making these changes right now. So I can't support the staff recommendations right now. And I had one question regarding the boardwalk. So you mentioned a couple of items that would qualify for the contribution to the public realm for this project. And the boardwalk is outside of the property line right now. So if that's a contribution, how can you control that this will really be built because it's outside your property? But it's mentioned as one of the contribution to the public realm.
We've had extensive conversations, of course, with the staff and with the city. And we've made the commitment to do that, and our approval can certainly require that. And we will install that wide boardwalk to give accessibility around the entire park. It allows the rear of the building, food service and what have you, to flow out onto the boardwalk and into the patios and what have you. So we will certainly make that commitment in writing, and that it will be as good as or better than what has been described as a part of
And the city is working with you on that.
We've had conversations about that, but we work with the city mostly about architecture. You really haven't. We have a lot of other things that are probably maybe not appropriate here, but plans for including the parks and water control structures and other things that we've been working with the mayor and with others that we plan to do because it's important. Our project that you don't step out in the morning into a flooded street. So those are things again outside the architectural side that we think are very important.
Further board comments?
Yes. I didn't have a chance to hear the whole conversations and last time, but reviewing the comments and reviewing what the previous 2 submittals were, and yes, there seems like some issues have been moved forward and resolved. Nevertheless, Calhoun Street needs to be looked at its balance. And mentioning that there was a mentioning about the Roper Hospital setback. The previous building, actually the 1-story building, had a good setback. So there was a balance of open space between 2 structures. Right now, there is some of it, but not. It seems like not enough. And so the presence of this mass of almost 8-story is somewhat controversial. Some of the things, and I will go very quickly. James started with that's what I'm looking at as well. The president of the public people's building is the Chambered Corner. It's homogeneous. And in this case, it seems like it feels whatever was designed there is the glazing. It's like an application on the background rather than continuation of the two sides of the building. So that's sort of one thing bothers me. Also, the glazing, I guess it says sunrooms and balconies on the east and west sides, or not really characteristic to Charleston at all. Even so, it's trying to look at it as as porches. They're not presenting that. They're not complementing those ways. So another thing, it seems like two sides, west and east, are really massive, and they more speak to Ashley House than to anything else, in my mind, how I see it, because of the massiveness and the extruded. Even so, they've broken down and by balconies, but it's all sort of recessed and not enough ins and outs. And the last, the Calhoun Street, and I think it could be subdivided in more parts to create more verticality and talk to the Calhoun Street at that level. But at least I'm thinking that maybe changing of the material on the middle part will help to bring out and subdivide this building in a more visible building. So changing the material, say it's that middle portion, it could be a cast stone, which you started to do actually, going 2 levels. So I'm not sure yet how I'm going forward.
Further board comment?
At the beginning of the applicant's presentation, he made note that spoken with all of the neighborhood associations of the abutting neighborhoods. And just as a point of information, that Charleston Village is the city recognized neighborhood for this project. Holston Park is just Holston Park is just a homeowners association. So, in having said that, and considering the voice of the public, both here tonight and in written comment and at previous meetings, I continue to be concerned about the project at the highest levels. And I think that the board gives the applicant the benefit of the doubt in identifying different things that can be updated or reconsidered or restudied as it relates to high-scale mass architectural merit. But at its foundation, the height is not in context to the neighborhood. The scale that someone walking down Calhoun Street and not feel overcome by the building, it's not in scale. The massing is simply irregular for Charleston Village and the south side of Calhoun Street. Architectural merit, talking about the precedent of the building, or the precedent acknowledged, and that therefore all over town, there's no consistency in design structure. I believe this board has said before that it was time to go back to the drawing board. And in the previous submission and this current submission, I think that is still the right answer, that it needs to go back to the drawing board.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Further board comment?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Marsh?
comments that I made in previous meetings prior to this application being tabled stand. I can be in support of a 7-story building on this piece of property with a additional floor for architectural merit. That's what the rules say you can have. I can be in support of that. I cannot be in support of that with this application. The contextual board precedent images that were used as part of this application and previous applications were, in my opinion, exceptional structures and detailing. Just am confused because those are some of my favorite buildings. From all of those buildings and all of those different styles, and I don't see what I see in each of these special buildings that you've used. I don't feel that same special detailing in the building that's being proposed. Many of my comments in previous applications were more detailed, and they're in the record, so I'm not going to repeat those.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Further board comments? If not, a motion.
Motion to deny the project with board and staff comment.
That is a motion to deny conceptual approval for this application incorporating board and staff comments.
Yes,
Did I restate that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Metter seconds. The motion is in order. I'll go down the roll. Ms. Sobchak, how do you vote?
Yea in favor? Oh, no?
Yes. Ms. Wheeler?
Nay, not in favor.
Mr. Brown?
Yea in favor.
Mr. Metters? And myself, nay, not in favor. So, but nonetheless, the motion to deny conceptual approval passes 3-2. All right, agenda item number 3. 21 Magazine Street.
21 Magazine Street is requesting final approval of the mock-up panel for exterior stucco elevator tower and steel stair. All right, the location of the Old City Jail here is located in the red box. Some images of the property and the building.
All set. Oh,
Got some images here.
there you go.
All right, and then we have the mock-up panel images. Okay, we ready? All right, ready for the applicant to present?
Now the applicant's presentation.
My name is Jay White. I'm the architect for the Old City Jail, and I appreciate everyone's time and attention to the mock-up during the review yesterday afternoon. And I'll just leave it at that. It's really fun to do that.
Thank you, Mr. White. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, city staff comments or recommendation.
Staff comment number 1, mock-up panel looks good. Staff recommendation, approve as constructed.
Pretty straightforward.
Try to be clear.
Any response from the applicant?
It's easy to do when there's only 2 materials.
Good. Well,
Keep that in mind.
Well, technically, there's
yes.
four.
Copper, yes.
Simple can be good.
So I have a question.
Of course.
Seriously. We reviewed this yesterday on site, but there are the zinc that's being used in the horizontal.
Yes.
The zinc is being eliminated on the corners.
That's correct.
All right. Board discussion.
We don't get often the stucco materials, so this one done is really nicely, and I don't have any issues with recommendation for approval.
Further comments?
Yes, as discussed on site yesterday, Mr. Chairman. It's just interesting how it works, but it's not fair. In several locations on the mock-up, what's going to happen to this product in the future? There will be slight hairline cracks. They exist now and they're going to exist in the future. As I discussed with Jay, I'd rather not have any zinc in it at all, but it's a perfectly appropriate way to use zinc in that application. But just for the record, this will result in looking like that old building looks probably 25 years from now. Small cracks, and that's just the nature of the process.
Good. Further board comments or motion?
I move for approval.
Second, is there a second? Subject seconds. I'll go down the roll. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on this one?
Yea in favor.
Mr. Mathers?
Yeah.
Subject?
Yeah.
Ms. Wheeler?
Yeah, in
And
favor.
myself, yea in favor. I don't think that's the quickest one we've done, but it's close. Other than an automatic approval. That was good.
Well, we have to praise it.
And thank you for joining us this evening and for volunteering. Mr. White will resume his seat on the board. Thanks again to Ms. Wheeler for filling in as an alternate.
That's all right, I can remain as the.
Agenda item number 4, 860 Morrison Drive.
All right, 860 Morrison Drive is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of multifamily buildings. This outline shows you the location with the interior red box as the hotel that was previously granted conceptual approval about a month ago. This is the site today with the building that was previously granted demolition approval. This is some adjacent buildings.
Mr. Bellows.
Hey everybody, I'm Eddie Bello with Bello Garris Architects, and I also have Eric Garris in our office here, Dave Sailors with Seaman and Whiteside, and also Housing Studio. Cortez Avila, Ceylon, Rhode Island. Travis, also at Housing Studio. So we have Mr. Chairman, we have a long presentation. I'm going to go as quickly as I can. I'm not going to go through all 68 slides.
You want an extension beyond 10 minutes?
If you don't mind. Just
15?
We've got, 15, just because we have 3 large buildings. I'm going to go as quick as I can, but I don't want to go too fast because we've spent a lot of time on this. Lawrence, if you could go to A3, just a couple of sheets down. Just better look out for this one. Yes. A couple of things. So we came before the board about a month ago. This project was deferred. And it was deferred not really because of height or mass. The board didn't really express any concerns about that. The concerns were mostly about architectural direction. And so as a team, we took a step back and decided to have a fresh approach to the design. So we have come up with a new exterior design for the buildings. We still have the same similar massing, similar heights, but the exterior expression is different. We did set up a couple of goals that we wanted to have. One was to have a clear architectural direction, a very integrated design. We wanted it to be residential. One thing about that is, unlike some of the projects that you struggle with or struggles with, like the one we just saw a few minutes ago, once you think of it less as a multi-family project that you might see in a suburban area, you know, a lot of houses, parking garage, perhaps, just like 295 wasn't. But instead, think of it, this is more of an apartment building that you might have in an urban context, like a larger city. Really, this part of Morrison is fairly urban for Charleston. So we're thinking of that residential nature as an urban residential. We wanted to have a distinctive but understated skyline. And then, much like our hotel design, we want this to be striking, but we want it to be quiet and restrained. This is a very dynamic part of the city in terms of what's happening on there now. There's a lot going on with the architecture and the massing of the office buildings, the larger housing just south of that, and on the site. Very, very dynamic. We didn't want to overdo it and add to that. We want our buildings to be fairly quiet. Okay. So next slide, please, Lawrence. Okay.
It's getting a little chilly.
Nope, no, sir.
Okay, next slide, please, Lawrence.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Real quick. So one thing that's interesting about this project is we've got one building that's right up from Morrison, and like most buildings in Charleston, you walk up to and experience it like other buildings, you know, as a pedestrian. But the majority of the building massing is going to be experienced from afar, either from these are bridge views, highway views, or long views down Morrison. So as we designed the exterior, we thought about that a lot. We thought about how this would look and how it would feel from a little bit further away. It's a little unusual for Charleston. All right, so let's skip to A9. I'm going through the site very quickly. Okay, so a couple of things. I'm going to let Katie talk about the site, but just to remind you, I'll have to. But again, here's the office building, the hotel that we just had approved about a month ago, and then what we're calling building 1, 2, and 3, our buildings here. And so I said this last time, but I want to repeat it. A lot of effort went into thinking about how to orient these buildings on the site. And think about what we have. We've got a hotel, we've got a good number of apartment units, we've got some retail spaces, we've got cars coming and going to serve all of that. And then we've got an incredible amount of parking that we've got to come. And so rather than the approach that you see a lot, and you just saw on a really poor example, we didn't put a garage in the middle, wrap it around, just have a big campus. We broke all the buildings up so they read as distinctive volumes. We have, I think, in a really creative way, hidden the parking behind this elevated terrace. And then we've opened up the site to views so that it feels much more open, much more flat. So, Katie, I'll let you take it from your landscape. Okay. Next slide, please.
Hi, my name is Katie Sailors. I'm with Stephen Whiteside, and I'm the landscape architect on the project. So you can see here, this is the overall site plan. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about this and sort of our goals for the project. So there are a couple things we wanted to achieve from a site standpoint. We really wanted to enhance connectivity on the site and to the site as well, and then also create a really strong connection to the water. So you can see in the site plan that we have this strong thread that sort of connects the streetscape through buildings 3 and 2 to the Cooper River. And so you'll see sort of that language and that theme throughout the whole site design. Starting at the streetscape, we have a 10-foot generous sidewalk that carries the character sort of down the street from the first phase of the project to the office buildings, then to this project. So it feels really cohesive down the street. And then right off of the streetscape, we have 2 terraces, one on the hotel, which we talked about previously, but then one off of building 1. And if you remember previously, building 1 sort of stepped down towards Morrison, and we heard from the Preservation Society and from staff comment that we would like to have a little bit more closet space And while we're not pursuing that as a UP point, we did feel like it was really important to have great public open space right on Morrison. So the terraces, they step up just slightly, they kind of bring down the scale of the building, and they also provide a really great pedestrian scale and activity zone for Morrison. And then moving into the site, you can see that we're calling this an entry plaza and not just your typical auto port. And the purpose here is to really emphasize the pedestrian activity, the connectivity. You can see these stripes down, and it looks like you're zoomed in just slightly. You can actually, and also go to the next slide, please. This describes a little bit more about the the entry plaza. And so you can see here that we're showing a really great paver design that's all flush. So no curves, it reads like a plaza, it feels more pedestrian oriented, and the stripes sort of carry the architecture into the streetscape. If you are entering the site, there's 1 lane of traffic in and 2 lanes out. And so if you're going to the apartments, you would take a right into the parking garage. And if you're going to the hotel, you would take a left either through the hotel and valet your car at the CWS lot, or you would circulate around this little landscape island and do drop off. And then there's 2 exits out. And so I know also there was a previous comment about the size and scale of this, and maybe to try to reduce that a little bit to make it feel a little bit more pedestrian oriented, but we really feel that through studying with auto turn and to make this actually function as a proper vehicular entrance, that the size is just large enough to allow for cars to properly traffic through the space, but not too large that it sort of de-emphasizes the pedestrian activity on the site. And then the third space I want to talk to you about, which I'm really excited about, is this terrace garden. And so where you might just have this blank wall where you have a parking garage, we thought that it would be really interesting to break it up and create this terrace staircase that sort of represents to us the marsh and the changing tides. And so we have this fountain here, which is sort of this direct connection to the water. And then you have this meandering staircase. It's almost like a river with occupiable space. And all of these spaces I'm describing are for the public. They're an extension of the right-of-way and would be a huge asset to the community. And then, so you can see some precedents on the right-hand side, some examples of some shared spaces where that we were really excited about, using these precedents and sort of reflecting them into our design. If you could go to the next slide, you'll see some examples. Here are some 3D images of the streetscape and then the terrace garden, and if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is what we were imagining, and then sort of carrying that idea through, you can see the break in the buildings 2 and 3 to really sort of drive home that idea of the connection to the water in the Cooper River. Can you go to the next slide, please? Some more images. The next slide, please. So we're just going to end on some materials. I think it's really important to note that we're using high quality materials. We want this to feel like a really energizing urban environment. And if you go to the next slide, please. Just some plant selection, some more traditional Charleston plant palette. And we really want this to feel like Charleston, but have kind of this new fresh edge to it. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer, and I'll turn it back in.
Okay, Lawrence, so can you go to A18? So I'm not going to go through all the floor plans because we've seen it before, but I think the main thing, again, just to emphasize, this just says leasing office, but it's actually a commercial space, and then all the parking is hidden back behind. Next slide. This just shows the upper levels. Just go through these plans just real quick, Lawrence. So the floor plans haven't changed dramatically from last time, other than some exterior skin changes. So go to page 26. Okay, so a couple of inspirational images, and so hopefully these relate a little better than the last application. So a couple of things. The one thing we always do, what we like to do, is set up some kind of regulating system to tie these buildings together to make them integrated in one simple way is to have a grid. In this case, we have a grid, and we like the idea of having some depth to the grid. Again, you can see this from far away. It's important to have some reasonable shadow. one thing that's also kind of interesting, once you have a grid and you have some depth, now you have a panel that you can sort of explore how that might work. Certainly, we're going to have a lot of windows, there's a lot of apartments, so how that fenestration pattern works needs to be organized. We've got to organize in one way for certain parts of the building and then organize in other ways in other parts of the building. And then last is the color tone. This is just a picture I took of the building over in the corner of Hansonborough. But one of the first things we thought of was why not bring in a little bit of color, a little bit of richness, slight window tie into Charleston. But if you think about the color palette that's been out there so far, they're handsome buildings, but they're all fairly monochromatic. It's all white and dark gray. They look great. We thought this, and even the hotel was all working. So what we thought of is why not have this built to feel a little more residential and let it be a little more distinctive just by its color and tone without having to do a lot of architectural gymnastics. So that was one way to do that. Next slide, please. So very simplistic. I love these kind of diagrams, but the idea is, so we set up this grid, and then this sort of drives how the whole project works. And we have this idea of this box that sits inside of that grid. Because of the way we position it, you'll see it when we go through, it creates, by the voids at the top and bottom, it creates a base in the middle and top. It's a subtle thing to do, but it's something that kind of helps tie how the buildings work, and it definitely helps address the street better. Next slide. Okay, so here are all the buildings. Again, our hotel's there on the left. And I keep showing the hotel because that is part of this project. So it's not like it could be built. This one won't be built without that one, vice versa. So it's part of the whole thing. But this shows what Katie just talked about. First of all, how we push this building back. It opens up the side a lot more as you go down Morrison. This great, really public amenity that is, even if you don't go into it visually, is something that's really beautiful. And then, of course, now it's wide open all the way to the one. Next slide. Okay, so this is building one. I'm going to let Eric get into this a little bit, but real quick, I'm not going to say what he's going to say, but you can see here how we set up the grid, and you can see how that box sort of fits in there and sort of moves the
So I could be pretty long-winded. I'm going to take one deep breath and try and
have one sentence
and try and speak through one lungful of air. Really, I just wanted to take a second to speak to the design direction that we're proposing for these projects. And it's a fairly large project. It's definitely large for Charleston. Eddie's going to speak through some more of the specific kind of design direction. But I think the objectives that we're trying to achieve in this building is a level of simplicity. But we're trying to create implied base, middles, and tops without being very explicit in the way in which we do see a lot of large-scale development in Charleston, a lot of large-scale multifamily. We're trying to provide something that's current, fresh, and is deserving of Charleston's architectural language and history. We speak about the uniqueness of Charleston's architecture, and we should strive to continue that in the 21st century. So in this elevation alone, which I want to speak to, we're trying to achieve a lot of blended symmetry and the floating box within the framework. So if you can see, we have a floating box. It's a residential level, a recessed balcony, and a lower glazed portion at the public realm. And then we have a symmetry of rail here and here, and then we have symmetries here and here about the midpoint of that elevated space, and then about the ground level as well. So as we move forward, hopefully, if you guys approve the design direction tonight, that's the one thing we want to let you know is that we're going to really pay attention to the richness of the levels and how the levels speak not only to their specific level themselves, but to other levels within the building to create a building that's cohesive in a very contemporary way that Charleston is deserving of.
All right. So before we leave this slide, so a couple of things. So again, this is the frame that we've talked about. We've made a couple of subtle moves. The columns here get a little bit wider. These are faceted. You'll see in some of the close-ups. A little bit wider to emphasize that base. We again have a much more formal entry with addressing the street in a little bit more of a prominent way. Next slide. Above was what was submitted last time and what we're proposing now. Couple of key changes again. Super excited to not have to have these roofs anymore. Huge difference in what you'll receive. And then you see one of the moves we made. The building's about the same width, but we pushed one part of it back and made it a little bit more slender, more elegant. And again, now the building comes all the way down to the ground. Next slide. Just talking about the materials. And the reason we're focusing on this one so much is because this one is obviously the most prominent. I think it's the most important one for the board, as it is the one that's closest to the public realm. And also from our design side, once we got this sort of has proven how all the other ones will work. Everything works. So the sort of terracotta color is glass reinforced, glass fiber reinforced concrete, which is basically cast concrete, light cast concrete. So it will have a stone to do it. It will feel like a heavy material. It will age like that. And that was intentional. We wanted to feel heavier, but in a light way, and sort of this light thing. We also wanted to contrast a little bit with the hotel, which is really, and the other materials are stuff you guys are familiar with, aluminum panels and like that. So that one is 831. Let's go next slide. Okay, so this is a section cut through the site, the terrace that Katie talked about a minute ago, looking south. And this is where the hotel would be, and where we're calling building 3 would be. This is building 2, this one. I don't want to go elevation, but this shows how this sort of base is emphasized, and then as you get up to the terrace, it's sort of moves up there. And you can see as we developed the grid, we're playing around the grid a little bit just to give it a little variety. Also at the top, push that GFRC back at the top to make it kind of a little less proportionally. Let's see, that is 832, 833. Let's see that one. Next one, Marks, please. Okay, again, this is Byron and how we're proposing now. Let's go to 835. Okay, so this is the south elevation. Morrison is on your left. Of course, the office building and garage are very close to this building, so you're not going to be able to see this, but I did want to point out how things work. One thing that's a little different from last time, we've got a brick base like we had last time. Last time there weren't many openings in it. We have, since that time, we realized we need to ventilate this garage. So we're going to have a window, but those will be similar in color to the brick, so that this reads as a solid base. I think that was a comment board by person. Good idea. We don't want to feel like it's on stilts, I guess. So 836, please, Lawrence. Prior and proposed. Now let's go to 838. Okay, I can't remember why I had this one. I think mostly because I wondered when we're going to go to that. That's why. This is really let's go to 839. Oh yeah. Right, so this is the site section cut through, just really comparing prior and proposed. I think the big takeaway is this bridges and how the proportions now are different. 840, please. Arts. Another site section, just close it up. All right, let's skip to A44. Okay, so this is the view from this is the east facade. Talk about everything elevation, but you can kind of see. One thing I did want to point out. I spent a lot of time on the bridge lately, and been thinking about what you'll actually see. And it's very difficult. It can be very difficult to see anything below that terrace. As you look over the bridge, at least you're on the bike lane or the parking lane, you cannot see much at all. We want it designed well to look good, but I don't know that that's a key component of the design. So next slide, please. Again, fire and proposed. Next slide, Lawrence. Just that same view. All right, let's skip to A53. Okay, so here's the north view. Again, the hotel would obscure a lot of this, but you can see on building 3, which is the building to the left there, how we're starting to break down that grid a little bit, to give a little variety. You can also see the sort of box. We keep talking about how it sort of sits in here, push this ground floor back, similar to what was there before, so that it creates the depth and it also has gives that little bit of lightness. Next slide, please. Again, prior proposed. Again, let's go to A60. Next one, Mark. Okay, so just to wrap up, we've got a couple of renderings. I think the key thing here is that this shows how open it is, how it's set back, all the great public space we're talking about, simplicity of the proportions and of the materials, and then how it's, and it also shows how close we are to those adjacent buildings to the south. Next one. The rendered elevation of that front. Very simple, clean. Next slide. So this one's if you're leaving sort of on Morrison underneath the overpass there. I think what's nice, honestly, it's just a hotel. I think what's nice about this is starting to show how that's sort of building 3 feels kind of like it's sort of raised. It's also got a really nice volume. Next slide. This is going more on Morrison, essentially now it's building step. You can see how now this building opens up the site by being pushed back. It's with something we discussed last time. Next slide. Almost done. Here's a view if you are, let's say, sitting in the back of a pickup truck going over the Cook River Bridge. Next slide. This one is if you're driving towards Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. And what we've done, if you remember last time, there were some angles in the building, which were pretty interesting. We didn't feel like that worked with this approach. So what we've done is stepped it and sort of, if you think about it, sort of steps as the turn. Next slide. And these last two are just some night shots. I think what I like about this, you know, I love these night shots, but the idea is it really shows how the street will be activated in a nice, quiet way. I mean, very well lit, not loud, but you know, just very subtle and just nice. And the last slide just kind of shows it all together. So we're very excited about the design. The team's done a lot of hard work. We're looking forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Bella. Public comment on this agenda.
Erin Minnigan with Preservation Society of Charleston. We would like to thank the applicant for meeting with us and walking us through the changes made to the design. Generally, we feel the proposal is much improved from the previous iteration and incorporates many of our recommendations regarding creating better hierarchy in the facades and clarifying vertical proportions. We also feel simplification in the architecture and material palette better relate to the adjacent hotel project as well as Charleston's broader urban character. However, we feel some further refinement is needed. First, while the base of the building reads more clearly, there is a lack of transition to the top of the building to distinguish it from the language of the body. Also, we feel the open void treatment of the top is unsuccessful as it feels unrefined and makes the building unnecessarily taller. While we are supportive of a creative approach to the top since it will be prominently represented on the skyline, it should feel more finished and substantial, which would improve the overall scale of the buildings as well. On the lower mast facing Morrison Drive, the fenestration toward the front of the building needs further study. As your eye moves up the building, there are several opening types, from large format glazing at the ground floor, to voids above, to smaller pane windows, to a void again at the top. This approach creates a busy composition and should be simplified. Finally, we would recommend making some adjustments to the rear of the buildings, as seen from the Ravenel Bridge. There are many similarities between buildings 2 and 3 in terms of their architectural language and materials. But currently, these buildings have an awkward relationship due to visible differences in the expression of their respective massing. Perhaps creating better symmetry or related massing between the structures will help them speak better to each other and read as true sister buildings. To reiterate, we feel the project is moving in a positive direction, and we urge the board to incorporate these modifications as specific conditions into the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Milligan. Further public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, city staff comments or recommendations?
Sure. I have some observations first. Number one, the project in conjunction with the recently approved hotel at this location enhances Morrison Drive, presents narrow frontage to the street, breaks the project into multiple buildings, hides utility service and much of the parking, provides a more gracious ground level to the street, uses materials in a clean and authentic manner, utilizes a repetitive rhythm administration, and provides textures and depth through its facades. Each of these responds to the Board of Architectural Review principles. Number two, height in this location is a product of the Upper Peninsula zoning. 3, responding to previous meeting comments, the project appears lighter and more residential. 4, the site continues to be wonderfully activated and dynamic. Staff comment. Number 1, the concept of the glass box inserted into an exterior framework is interesting. Staff finds that it provides appropriate facade depth and rhythm. For an already tall building, however, extruding this system a full floor continuously around each building top further increases the perception of height and gives a boxy and at some locations unfinished appearance. Furthermore, as only minor interruptions exist in the cadence of the framework, it can appear static on some facades. Restudy the exterior framework to be dynamic, concentrating at the top, but also considering how it can erode in some locations to reveal the glass box. 2, we encourage enlivening the skyline, but traditionally this has been with more punctuated elements. Study how the modulation at this massing, at the building blocks generally and at the top specifically, may make the buildings more dynamic. And 3, height, scale, and mass are appropriate. The general architectural direction, while a bit unusual for Charleston, could be acceptable with some tweaking. And with those, the recommendation is conceptual approval with board and staff comments.
Thank you, Tori. Any response from the applicant?
Yes, I'll be brief. So I think, first of all, we agree with a lot of those comments. It's interesting about the top. We spent a lot of time thinking about the top. A couple of things. So if you compare this first response as well as the whole floor taller, it's really not. Before, there was a building with a very substantial mechanical screen on top. What we've done is basically just incorporated that mechanical screen in that box. And so yes, technically it's a little bit taller, but we feel like the overall is that it feels lighter and more elegant. I will say, and this is something we've gone back and forth with in the office, we've not, where we landed is where we want to go, but we recognize that development is needed, but we intentionally did not want to add a lot of stuff. You know, we had things on the top and we didn't like that, and then we did some other things. You know, the whole idea is that it's very, very simple. That's not to say that it can't be developed further, and you know, both of y'all's comments I think are good. I just am sort of defending where we ended up. We want it to be simple. We don't want to do it unfinished. It should be punctuated. We don't want to, I don't really want to busy it up, I guess. So I'd be careful about that, but I think the ideas that y'all are bringing up are certainly something we agree with. Yeah, we just didn't want cap to the building. We want the top to feel like the rest of the building. But anyway, y'all will think that those are something that we can work on next time as a next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pellet. Board comments.
I'll start. I think that this is a really successful concept for the general architectural direction. It's got the sort of clarity of form and materials that our lines look for. While the language is very different, that's okay because where it is in the city. I think it's got a tremendous amount of promise, and I can support its approval.
Thank you, Mr. White. I'll just jump in really quick. I think Mr. Bello knows me well enough that he won't take this as an insult. I agree with you and understand that at the very top of the building, you want a lightness there and you don't want a cap. My concern is exactly what Ms. Parrish said, which is that it looks unfinished, almost to take a second glance. I don't pretend to know how you fix that other than to say it's worth some restudy to figure out how to maybe not look unfinished, but also not have a heavy cap or cornice. comments. So I think everybody's agreeing this, we can still work, we need to work on that. Other than that, I don't, as Mr. White has said, conceptually, I don't have a problem with the cage and then void box empty. There's just something that's got to go at the top of the building. Refine is the word, I think. Refine and complete as opposed to cap. Further board comments?
I think it's quite an improvement from what you can compare what was before, and particularly on the Morrison Drive. It's elegant, it's striving to the sky, proportions are right. To me, the changes in width of the columns, and that indicates the base more. And the top frame is actually helps proportions of that elevation altogether. I'm not sure about all around. Because it seems like when you look at the long elevations, it's so monotonous that maybe breaking top will help to get away from that. Other than that, I think this design responded to all our concerns we had previously. And it really speaks to hotel now as a twin structure, different. It's like my nephew and niece, but they're together. And that promenade and Lombard Street, which I'm calling, is going to be really interesting. Probably unique for Charleston. So really urban approach. I hope the plants will survive that and that, but looking forward.
I want to think about the urban residential on Morrison Drive. I think that's worthy. Think about the number of times that Eddie mentioned 295 as part of this pitch, which was 5. The presentation and the sequence of the presentation, having Katie come in and talk about the importance of the review card, or you even talk about the design of the building, I think that was great. It reminds me of one Hindu deal where every building is separated by a view all the way through to the water, and I picked that up right away. I think that's great. So it also, I mean, it works here. It's just a comment, the grid that you see on the outside of the building. That grid, you use that a lot. I think about your other projects in the city that have come to this board recently. A lot of them are capitalizing on that grid system. At another time, I'd like to hear how that's part of just your company. That's what we're going to do. We're going to specialize in grids. But then you think about that floating box within the framework. The way you described it, it's like you've got this. I was thinking, how could you turn this around in 2 weeks? And go, well, really, it's just dropping something on the outside of the box that changes it. And I think it looks great. Right. And I know you got to stretch to get this, but if you look at it somehow, so you can just isolate the buildings, and they look like single houses. I mean, they're not wide, they're very tall, and they're deep. And I did that today, and if you really do, you can kind of, there's that sense to me that I'm driving down Fifth Street. I mean, there's 2 of them, and because of the separation, the greatness of the separation, the height, the depth, I mean, I think it's a positive feeling for me. And it reminds me too of your, not the appearance of it or anything else, but the success of your Meeting Street project, which I think is a great building. And the same thing. It's not wide on the front, it's tall on the street. So, I like it.
Further board comments?
Really excellent work. This is a huge upgrade from the previous presentation. My only concern is the on-ramp onto onto the bridge, looking over, you said that you switched out the brick for the paneling so that exhaust can get out. It looks almost too industrial down that part, so activating it with some additional landscaping or something would, I think, lighten that up. I almost wish that the parking garage on Morrison wasn't there so that you could see more of the building. So, but yeah, really excellent.
Very good. Any further board comments, or could I entertain a motion?
I'll introduce a motion for conceptual approval with board and staff comments.
Mr. White's motion is for conceptual approval incorporating board and staff comments. Did I say that correctly? Yep. Good and roll. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
We need a second. Do we have a second?
Not yet. Oh, we need a second. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
So second for Mr. Brown. The motion is in proper order, so the meeting hasn't gone long, but it's been intense. Mr. Metters, how do you vote on this motion?
Yay.
Ms. Sobchak? Mr. White?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Brown?
Yay in favor.
And myself, yay in favor. Thank you to the applicant.
Thank you very much.
All right, agenda item number 5. 176 Concord Street.
26 Concord Street is requesting preliminary approval for proposed facade color revisions and additional guest space activation. Perkins haven't been reading any of the descriptions all night.
It's okay.
We'll survive.
We know.
Here's the context. This is not the building that's there, but the property.
Yep.
The property, not the building.
It's another building that had no defenders when it was coming in.
I can imagine. Got some context of what's across the street.
Good evening. Nathan Schutte with McMillan Glass Hasden Smith. It's my pleasure tonight to give you a bit of a progress update, if you want to call it that, as this project has been in front of the board a number of times. And as of last Thursday, we have topped out the project officially. We have a long ways to go, and that has given us plenty of time to talk internally about the project, watch it come to life, and hopefully leverage opportunities we've seen along the way to make improvements to the project. We were in front of the board almost a year ago, actually, with some requests, quite frankly, to do that with the addition of some balconies, some other elements with the building, minor tweaks. But since that time, we have had tremendous internal discussion about the project, and we'd like to go to the next slide. The opportunity to sit and kind of stare at the revised renderings for a little bit. And within that, we feel it would be appropriate to come tonight and propose to you a minor modification in the color scheme on the exterior of the building. We'd like to go to the next slide. Effectively, we'd like to introduce a new color, a bit of an accent color. It's kind of close, I apologize. Sorry, you're fine. Weird spot. Into the color concept. If you look at the picture on the screen, the upper left-hand corner is a rendering of the project as it is currently approved. What we are proposing is really an adjustment to the kind of body color of the building here and here, so that they neutralize themselves a little bit. We're taking a little bit of yellow out, and the introduction of a shutter color. In the previous color scheme for the project, or the current color scheme for the project, all of our ornamental metal on the outside of the building, the balconies, and as well as the shutters, are all the same color. And with the additional balconies, with the additional shutters, we'd like to enliven that a little bit. We believe it's appropriate to do so at this location on the project. So effectively, our color scheme is adjusted quite simply to take a little bit of the yellow out of the current stucco building color and introduce an accent color on the shutters themselves. When we do that, we do have some porch over porches. The current kind of porch ceiling color with the shutters nearby was a little off, so we are adjusting that ceiling color slightly to stay within the family. So that is the color, the proposed color change that we're asking for consideration this evening. I'm happy to talk about that in any more details or desires. There are a couple of other things we do want to talk about. If you would like to go to the next slide for me, please. You did also discover along the way a bit of an incongruity in what was previously submitted and approved, and this has to do with the glass at the arrival court, the motor court here underneath the canopy. If you look in the rendering above, you will see how dark the glazing system is in the back, and that's really because what was intended or should have been congruent with the other white glass frame finishes on this ground level throughout the project, we frankly just missed and had them noted in the previous submissions as black. So we're proposing, relative to our current approval, changing the ground level storefront, the arrival glass system, it's not actually storefront, but the arrival glass system on that ground level to be white to match what it is in the rest of the project. I think it's possible to note, for instance, in the rendering, this particular one is white, as this is the one on the opposite side. As we had been consistent throughout the project, we had them wrong in coordination at the ground. We would like to make them lighter. We think it's brighter, it's better. It's what we had originally intended. Next slide. This one is a little more, it's a little more technical in nature. And this is something we want to be eyes wide open with the board about. When we were in front of the board through design, we talked a lot about how this building was going to be built, how we were going to manage the stucco system, manage the deflection on that, and what would be and where would be the joints in that stucco system. As we've worked through the framing and the delegated design of this, we need to move to and eliminate one of those horizontal joints. So we're not changing the size of them, we're not changing how we detail any of that, we're simply relocating them and eliminating one. If you go to the next slide, it might be easier to see, maybe it is not. The currently approved location aligns them all with all of the window heads. What we are doing effectively is moving two of the window head located ones on levels 3 and 4 up off of the window head. So this is the currently approved location. And if you go to the other one, we eliminate the top one, but we do have to move two of them up off of that window head. So unfortunately, it's a bit of a progression through the design of that framing system, but we are happy to say that we do get to eliminate one and have broader expanses of stucco through the project. Then let's go to that. Go ahead, 2 slides, please. The last couple of things, again, are kind of opportunities we see. We've talked a little bit about them in the past. Actually, it's really only one thing. One more slide. I lied, one more after that. Those were all comparative elevations showing where the horizontal joint would be relocated. On the corner of Concord and our arrival here to the project, there's this quaint little 2-story element. That 2-story element above is flanked by a couple of guest rooms, and we see an opportunity in activating this little piece of roof. And so that's what you see in the upper right-hand corner of that exhibit. That red indicates that little bit of a roof terrace space. We would like to provide access to that, or are proposing to provide access to that from the guest room, the plan north as it is in the upper right-hand corner. We'll detail that the exact same way we're doing all of our other roof details with a glass rail, with a pedestal system. It effectively seems kind of silly not to utilize this space, and we'd like to provide it as another guest experience for visitors to the hotel and to Charleston. So with that, these are the refinements we're like to share with you tonight. Would appreciate your support in incorporating into the project. It's a bit of a color change, a couple of color changes, a little bit of activation here on the corner, and then consideration for the relocation of those horizontal joints.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask
Of course.
So I get access to that corner space up there, but you actually have to install glass or some type of clear rail above the cap out here, or is you're going to have enough drop there so that you don't have to do that?
We are adding a rail, but the height of that rail okay. Phoning a friend, Jennifer Johnson in the back. So the glass will extend 1 foot above the parapet.
So that would be visible.
From the ground, it would not be visible. It's set in from the perimeter, just like we did everywhere else. So it's not on the top of the parapet. It's actually set into the inside of the parapet. The parapet in that location is somewhere in the realm of 18 inches deep, and then it's set in about 4 inches to the inside of that. So that glass rail that will stick up a foot is roughly 2 feet from the face of that cornice profile.
And we're on the second floor, so it's in far enough.
So yeah, what you see in this rendering from the corner is what you would see.
So, and just to clarify too, the guest rooms that are at the opposite end of Concord, that already has a rail. Is that right?
So
That's already been active.
yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure, because I'd like to just make sure that I understand what you're saying. The line of sight is pushed back far enough within that outside cornice wall that you don't see it. I guess if you get far enough back, you might see it.
You might see it, and that's part of. Again, we've utilized glass rails on this project carefully and diligently to try to manage that where we need it to.
I agree. So and this is how it is. Okay, thank you.
And so we'll go back into the ordinary course. Presentations completed. Anyone from the public care to speak on this agenda item? Didn't think so. City staff comments, recommendations.
Number one, staff comment number one, the minor changes associated with this application cause no concern. The newly proposed color palette incorporates a more neutral body color and a new hue in the accent color of the shutters. Overall, the addition of the new hue adds increased richness to this large building. And two, revisions to the placement of horizontal control joints in the stucco are related to warranties requiring the control joints to be located at the slip track locations below post-tension slabs. While a bid and customary, staff finds these locations visually acceptable. And the recommendation is final approval for revisions or to determine if the color revision shall be confirmed through the existing mock-up panel.
Any response, Nathan? No. Okay, thank you. You're good with that. All right. We'll jump right back into board discussion we were having with Mr. Metters. I don't think any of these are big ask, and in terms of activating that balcony, Charleston architecture has always been about practicality, and so we shouldn't have dead open space. We should have space that is usable and is an amenity, and so that's not a big ask. I'm not worried about the glass rail. I agree with Tori that I think the color palette's more favorable. The old yellow was strong yellow. So I think that this is nice, and I'm glad that, again, as with the previous revisions, seldom do we have the presenter or applicant who comes back and openly says, well, gee, we made a mistake, or we didn't count on this, and we think we can make it better. So I actually appreciate that. And I certainly understand with the work that I do that having a warranty on that control, an enforceable warranty on that control joint is a very practical problem for you. So I'd support the request and certainly support staff's comments. Further board discussion.
I agree with staff's recommendation.
I'm sorry, Rita.
I agree with staff recommendation.
So the choice of building materials leads to these control joints, right? So like white, like Jay doesn't have control joints on this concrete block with the stucco going on top. So, I mean, it's difficult because it's gonna be very visible, those control joints not being aligned. So it is what it is. I think that your paint colors are gonna end up being about what they were, so I'm glad after they fade out. So, I think that's probably good.
Any further board comment, or may I entertain a motion?
I make a motion for approval
Is there a second?
with board and staff.
Okay. Approval of, preliminary approval incorporating board and staff comments.
Yes, sir. Really quickly, I think staff recommendation was for final. Do we see it doing or?
I am
Well,
okay with that.
Nathan requested preliminary on your application, but I'm
I
not
think
sure
this
that's
is a
what you meant.
clarification because we're asking this with, I don't know how it works. We're asking this question relative to how much mock-up revision do you want to see with the new color scheme? I think technically we needed to ask it as a preliminary.
I don't think we need to see this on the mock-up. Does anybody on this board think we need to see this on the mock-up? Given what Nathan's done in the past? No. Okay. I think that
And I
answers that.
think you're comfortable with
Final. Yep, very good. So you make a motion for final approval, incorporating board staff comments? Yes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. White seconds. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on this motion?
Yea in favor.
Mr. Metters? Ms. Sobel? Mr. White?
Yea in favor.
And myself, yea in favor. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr.
Yes, sir. Take a break? Okay.
No, just literally.
Okay, sure. We'll be at ease for just a minute while we get our next application ready. Okay, good. Thank you, sir. You all issues a green pen?
No, I just have to grab this out of the bag. I don't even know why I have it.
Well, no being an architect, those kinds of quirks, and I just, it's like that. Notice Jay only uses a green pen.
Yeah, most of my fountain pens have some sort of sepia ink in it.
Okay, very good.
With still an off-white pen.
It does. Of course. Right. Everybody ready to move to agenda item number 6? Okay, very good.
Agenda item number 6 is 518 East Bay Street. This one is requesting preliminary approval for a multifamily mixed-use building. It is in the Garden District, Heights District 4 and 6, and it sits within the Old and Historic District. And
Well,
we might
so
have some
hold on one
context.
second.
Hold on.
Contact slides.
Some context slides to refresh you on where this project sits. And some existing site photos. All right, thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be here and appreciate the opportunity to present to the board this preliminary approval consideration. And thanks to staff. I'm going to be very brief. Certainly don't want to skip over anything that's relevant, but prepared to talk about any of the details that need discussion. But for the sake of brevity, I'd like to begin with slide 44. Rendering. We're very close.
We won't hold the time against you.
I could have started with all the precedent drawings, the technical drawings, but I thought we might just. So the design has progressed, and one of the most significant features of the progression of the design is the fact that we have relocated the main entrance to East Bay Street, and we did away with the pergola that we had, the glass pergola that formed the entry off of Charlotte Street in the prior design, and we think this offers a multitude of advantages, in addition to cleaning things up, making it more aesthetically pleasing in every way. But this will be the front entrance, and we are going to use cast stone around the front entrance, and cast stone will form that retaining wall, which also hides the handicap ramp and so on. And we think this, as we turn the corner to slide 46, well, let's if you don't mind. You can begin to see how this plaza begins to open up and things become more clean. So that's one of the most significant features that we want to emphasize. And if I could refer you to slide 48. Again, you can see without that pergola and the entryway, we've got a much cleaner facade on Charlotte Street. So I think the design is becoming increasingly clarified and is very simple, and I think there's elegance and simplicity. So another thing that we have tried to do too, if we go to slide 48. Yeah. Is that we have excuse me, I was you could roll the there you go. All right. Back up just one. I'm sorry. Very good. Another comment was from the prior was that the horizontal ACM panels, they were previously vertical, so we've now made these horizontal. I would like to note that there is a little bit of distortion in the rendering. We'll show you some sections which indicate that the sixth floor is going to be a little bit shorter. but we've moved those panels to a horizontal position. And then finally, if we could go to sheet 42. This is a section which indicates a better relationship of the sixth floor to the edge, and you can see the railing that we've got, and we'll flip back up to one of the earlier renderings in just a second, but we got away from the glass railing and actually went to this railing. We brought a sample in tonight to see. So happy to walk through the various sections and some of the progressions that we've done. Bill, you may want to comment a little bit on the plaza, slide 55.
So on the site, we've really just continued to advance the design. We've been meeting with both TRC and DRC, incorporating their comments into it as well. Actually, go, I think it was back one, Lawrence, the overall site plan. One more, I think. Okay, there we go. So we've continued to advance the design based on DRC and TRC comments. Like Steve said, we've incorporated a ramp on the East Bay side. It's not an actual ramp, it's less than 5%, so it's very kind of gracious and wide and kind of integral to the design. We've incorporated some bike racks and some other kind of minor changes, but really just advancing the design and changing the materiality a little bit, incorporating the cast stone. The next slide, Lawrence, can just advance one time. We just have some sections that kind of cut through to show those different relationships along the street, with street level and then building level elements. And go ahead and advance to the next one. Even though this isn't technically part of y'all's purview, wanted to at least show you that we are also advancing the design on the two rooftop elements. So this is the courtyard over the parking, and then this is the rooftop at the highest level. Next one, Lawrence, with the pool. So we're also advancing those design elements as well.
And Lawrence, just to give a little bit more of an overview, if I could request slide 58. This gives you a little bit more of a view of how, again, things evolved along the front plaza. We are proposing painted brick, but based on some of the comments, we may evolve away from that for some of these elements. Slide 60 shows you some of the spacing in the interior courtyard where the existing single house is and where the next single house adjacent to it will be, the courtyard there. And slide 61. These are just more detailed slides. You'll see the projections of the canopies, which are steel, and underneath will typically have wood under those soffit areas. And then back to slide 44. Again, front entry, which is hopefully well modulated to everybody's satisfaction. And you see that we're trying for a little bit of tonal difference between the 6-story structure, which is larger next door, and the 4-story, and some of the other elements. So we get some differentiation there, not only in massing, but also in terms of color treatment and even texture.
Excuse me, Steve. Let me just also point out, we've left off street trees in these renderings so you can actually see the building, but everywhere that you see a cutout there will be a street tree. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know that you aren't making this as part of your presentation, but I appreciate that sign. Well, I was being serious. addressing the building.
Thank you. Happy to entertain questions and move on to staff comments if there are any. Again, I'm not trying to rush things, but.
Nope.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Mr. Metters has a question.
Materials.
Well, we did bring preliminary materials, preliminary selections with us and included. Do you want to note any of that? We brought them if you want to talk about them. But
Is that great?
Yeah. All right, so those materials are anticipated, what specific brand of the is not chosen yet, but we are looking for the color and the texture of the brick. So this what we are thinking about 6-story portion. And previously we were saying that we will be painting that, but now it's a face brick altogether. So we are not doing that. And so at the top on the 5th story, where the terrace, we have the terrace, we will have the cast stone coping. So we were looking at that. This is cast stone actually on that rendering. That's what we're thinking to use, and that's AMC. That's kind of working with our brick, and those are various metals we have on the project. And this is actually our paving on the courtyard and at the front. All that said, we also have the window. That's a color window in there, and I'm not going to drive that on.
You don't have to. We can see it here from here.
Bring it to you if you like.
No, that's okay. We can see it from here. We can go look at it.
The rail is velvet, so this is kind of typical. We just got a little bit different design. Very simple. Yeah. One of the things I do want to mention. So we don't have any light fixtures on walls in these townships right now. And the reason why, because we have this kind of continuous canopies all around, so we will have a continuous lighting, recessed walls, and that will be plenty, we think, but also will emphasize the ground level continuously and nicely. We will have, there's a canopies, there's balconies, so we will start at the Charlotte Street and the courtyard and go around and through the East Bay, and the ceiling there will be done and grow with IPA or teak. We will do that. All other canopies will be metal, similar to in size of the planks and things like that, but also with the electric. I think that's what we are looking for.
Very good. I don't think we have anyone left here to give a public comment. Anyone? No?
It's like cooler.
Yeah, exactly.
So, a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, of course.
So, and it's probably answered if, but there's a portion of the brick that looks like maybe the grout joints recessed really deeply when you look at it. It looks like it's textured. My question goes away if we're using this, and if it's painted, if you have a deep depth on that grout line, it can really get dirty in there. If it's white, then that could really, and that's kind of what that picture looked like. I actually, you see that it almost looks like it has dirt in there. That texture on that brick right there, I did really. I mean, I kind of like it, but it's.
I agree.
Yeah.
And we've proposed painted brick, again, to get some textural differences and some color differences, but there are concerns on the painted brick. We recognize that too. So as we come into final, we'll be discussing that with staff or hopefully make a selection everybody feels comfortable with.
Very good. City staff comments or recommendations?
One observation, this project continues to progress nicely with only relatively minor concerns remaining. Staff comment number 1, exposed brick rather than painted brick is preferred. 2, the railing at the 6th floor at East Bay Street, as evident on page 39, is very prominent now, and this condition is uncharacteristic for downtown. We studied for ways to minimize the visual presence of the railing. 3, at the top of the 5th floor, the cornice is heavier in the renderings as opposed to the elevations. The condition in the rendering is preferred. 4, which I believe you sort of touched on and addressed, at the 6th floor against Washington Street, there has been a reduction in window count. Additionally, the window height around the 6th floor has decreased, making for the appearance of a much taller parapet. These conditions decrease the lightness of the recessed penthouse. For these reasons, brick may be the more appropriate exterior at the 6th floor. Nevertheless, restudy the height of the windows and parapet is worthwhile. And 5, wrap the exterior materials into the openings of the parking garage. And then 6, you have brought many of the materials, but the note was to applicant is to have all materials ready for review and approval by final review. Oh, and we're recommending preliminary approval with board and staff comments.
Thank you, Tori. Sorry to jump the gun on it.
No,
Any
that was
response from the applicant?
Yes, certainly. Lawrence, if I could ask you to flip to slide 42, please. Okay. Thank you. You might have to squint a little bit to see this, but regarding the railing, one of the ideas there is you can see how the railing actually sits a little bit behind the parapet. We have the ability to move it even further back, so we could obscure most of the view of the railing, almost all of it, from the street level. Just slide it back a little bit. So we'll again test that lines of sight and all before we come to final. So easy solution on that one. Regarding the windows, Luda, in doing the layout and design, had a number of interior walls that were conflicting with windows. We've been studying ways to minimize those conflicts so we can get back to the some of the window patterning we had before. So we think that's certainly possible. Also, we've got tall ceilings, so we can we think we can raise the window heads just a little bit, and, which will help. And then finally, I'm not sure why, but the illustrator, some of these views do exaggerate that, in particular that 6th floor and some of the windows. And you can see from this actual section what the exact proportions and level will be. And if we pull a couple of those windows up a little bit, and I think that will help. And then you can see how the 6th floor actually relates. When in the illustrations, for again reasons I can't explain, it's a little bit exaggerated. So this gives you an actual more construction technical look at how that would relate. If we go to slide 55. Once I just made a mistake. Excuse me, slide 42, forgive me. Right, 42. Right there. This also shows you again the relationship of that 6th floor to the 5th, and you can see it's actually a more diminutive scale than may appear on the renderings. But the other thing I wanted to point out was the way we're finishing the parapet gap Staff mentioned that they would like to see a heavier cornice as was shown in the renderings and versus some of the elevations, some of the lining that didn't show from the elevations. So if we look at that detail, we've got a double roll-up and then a corbelled brick out and then a cast stone cap on top. So I think that'll give it a nice beefy cornice and a great finish to the top of the building. Yeah, my horses should have
It's okay. You're doing great. Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that was the response. We'll now move to board discussion and a potential vote on this agenda item. What do my fellow board members have to say about this project?
I agree with staff's comments and recommendation.
You're good? Same. I think the project continues to move in a very nice and cohesive direction. I particularly think that East Bay facade is going to be very attractive to pass by. And I would also agree with board staff comments. The minor detail issues, I'm very confident staff and the project will be able to get ironed out. Is there a motion on this agenda item?
Do we, as a board, want to see it at final? Right.
I think so. We've asked for a fair number of restudies, and so I think that's fair.
Okay. I'll introduce a motion for preliminary approval with board and staff comments.
Okay. The motion is for preliminary approval incorporating board staff comments. It's been seconded by Mr. Brown. Mr. Metters, excuse me. It's getting late. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on this item?
Yea in favor.
Mr. Metters?
Yea in favor.
Mr. White? Yea in favor. Myself, yea in favor. Thank you to the applicant.
Thank you. Yeah. Great evening.
Thanks.
Hope everybody's not too tired.
Recording stuff.